Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'shalom L'shalom. Shalom, Reb Brian Yosef Schachter-Brooks here. Welcome to the first in a new series about the 32 paths of presence, the 10 sefirot, and the 22 Hebrew letters of the Kabbalah. This first episode is about the letter Aleph, which is the quality of openness, also called spaciousness or inner vastness, all of which are qualities of who we are on the deepest level, which is the level of consciousness, beyond thoughts and feelings, beyond the personality. So how do we access the freedom of this inner vastness and the equanimity of knowing ourselves as the open space within which all experience comes and goes? That's the subject of this first episode. Enjoy. There's this classic story about a couple who go to a marriage therapist. And the therapist says, okay, I want you to speak to each other. I want you to tell each other what you're really feeling. And so the woman looks at the man and she says, you are just being such a complete jerk. And the therapist says, okay, wait a minute, hold on. Let's keep this in I statements, okay? You don't project onto him and say what he is, say how you feel. And she says, okay, I get it. I feel that you are a complete jerk. All right, I've told that one many times. It's one of my favorite ones. So it needs clarification. Presence is a very, very simple thing, but how do you live it in real time? If we simply say be open to your feelings, be in connection with what you're really feeling, then it's very easy for someone to misunderstand and think that type of communication would be fine because you're being authentic about your feelings, right? And actually, one of the members in this community asked earlier this week about openness to feelings. So I thought we would talk about this a little bit. We are in the fall, in the autumn, and according to how we are going through the paths this year, we are attributing the temperate seasons, both the fall and also the spring, to the letter Aleph. And so we've been singing the Aleph chant and talking about Aleph a little bit. Aleph, according to the way that I understand Aleph, which is based on Rabbi Yitzchak Ginsburg's book on the Aleph Bet, Aleph has to do with what we're talking about. It has to do with openness to feelings. And particularly openness to the full spectrum of feeling, because we tend to push certain feelings away and want to have other feelings. We have preference, which is totally natural, and we should have that preference. We should want to feel good and not want to feel terrible. That's absolutely true. And yet at the same time, we have to recognize that the preference that we have happens on the level of the intellect. On the level of the intellect, we can understand that we want to feel good things and don't want to feel bad things, and we can make decisions to lead us more towards good feelings. That's completely valid. However, at the same time, this is the tricky part, is that if we want to go towards good feelings and away from bad feelings, then the paradox of it is that we have to be open to whatever feeling is arising in the moment. That means that in the level of intellect, we understand we're trying to cultivate positivity, but on the level of presence, meaning like what's our relationship to the actual experience we're having in this moment, we have to be, if we want to employ this wisdom, we have to open ourselves, which means letting go of judgment, letting go of resistance to what is arising in our experience, and feel it on purpose. That's a way of explaining presence, is it's feeling and the full spectrum of experience, being in the experience, being where we are right now on purpose. And letting go of the tendency of the mind to take us away, and also, perhaps even more importantly, letting go of the tendency for the emotions on the feeling level to contract and block ourselves from certain feelings because we don't like them. So that's what it has to do with, that's what it means to be open. Now, of course, when we're, well, most of us don't know how to do that unless we practice it, right? We have to hear these teachings and learn how to do that, even though it's something very simple, and it's almost like sounds redundant to reality because we're already experiencing whatever we're experiencing. But this is really different. Presence is really different because it means that we are putting our intention, that we're making a decision to fully be where we are. That's a huge difference from just passively being the victim of whatever we happen to be experiencing to being in it on purpose. The miracle that changes everything when we do this, the root of the transformation that happens is not, first of all, on the level of feeling or intellect. It's on a level of identity, meaning that when we're in the process of resisting something that we're experiencing, then another way of describing that is we've become identified with a certain point of view. We've become identified with our feelings. We feel, I don't want to be here. And as opposed to being the space of awareness within which the feeling is arising. So when we purposely be where we are, when we purposely feel whatever we're feeling and open to the full spectrum of whatever's happening, then this shift in identity can happen where and it's not all at once necessarily, although sometimes it can be dramatic, and we have to do it again and again. It's a practice, but we shift into being the space of awareness. And that's the radical shift that we're going for, which is really quite different from trying to work directly and only with on the level of thought and feeling. This is the level of being nothing, in a sense, but it's not really nothing. It's something. It's consciousness, but the consciousness is aware of qualities as opposed to being a certain quality. And the miracle is that when we do that, the more we can be consciousness, somehow that quality of consciousness, which is openness and acceptance and all of the different midot that we learn about with the paths. So, for example, today's Yom Rishon, Sunday, the first day of the week, the first day of, as we've come back in the Torah, to Parshat Vayera. And what is Parshat Vayera? Begins with a story of Avraham being hospitable to the dusty wanderers that are coming through the desert. And this is actually where the stereotype, in a sense, in our tradition of Avraham being the archetype of loving kindness, chesed, and hospitality, and so on. It comes from this story, beginning in this week's Parsha, of how he invites in these dusty strangers who turn out to be angels, but he doesn't really see them as angels at first. He sees them as men. That's what it says, describes them as anashim, men walking through the desert, and he runs to greet them. And the Midrash says that he runs to greet them even though he's in a lot of pain, because at the end of the previous Parsha, he did circumcision on himself. So he's still in the pain of that, and it's hot. It says it's in the heat of the day. So Abraham becomes this archetype of chesed, of loving kindness and hospitality. And in this Parsha, another thing happens, which is that after the sequence with him inviting and making food for the angels, two of the angels go down and they go to test the inhabitants of Sodom, because with the intention that maybe Sodom is going to be destroyed, because Sodom has become like this evil place, and it's evil because it's the opposite of being hospitable, the opposite of hospitality. There's a passage where the angels come into the home of Lot, and all of the men of Sodom they descend on the home, and they're trying to get in, and they're trying to break down the door. And the angels, it says I'll read the passage here. Ve'et ha'anashim asher petach babayit. So the men were by the opening of the house. This is very interesting. In other words, they're very close to opening. They're close to this attitude of openness that we're talking about, but they don't get it. So they're not getting the attitude of openness. Hiko basan verim, and they are struck with what's translated as blindness, but the word is a little different from the ordinary word for blindness. And it's translated sometimes as dazzling blindness. It has to do with, it implies being like you're blinded not because the eyes aren't working, but because they are blinded by something, too much light, too much dazzle. So what is that? What is being dazzled so that you can't find the petach? You can no longer find the opening because you're dazzled. Well, that's exactly what happens to us all the time. We get dazzled by our reactivity, by our own feelings. Our feelings come in and they have the power to possess us like a demon. We get taken over, we get dazzled, and suddenly we can't see the petach anymore. We can't see the openness, meaning that we can't see ourselves. We don't know. We forget temporarily that we are openness. So the message here is that, well, there are two things. It's a nice combination, actually, with the Aleph and the Bet, because Bet represents hospitality, which is an attitude of welcoming what is. What a hard thing to do it is to welcome what is when what is not something you like. Right? That's why it's so important to talk about this, because we have to prepare. I can't remember in the moment the teacher, but one of the Hasidic Rebbes said that you have to prepare for the tests that come to you in your life, because you're not going to be able to prepare once the test comes. You have to prepare it. That's what prepare means. It means we have a conversation about it. It means we practice with it. It means we give ourselves the embodied experience of whatever it is we're practicing, which in this case is openness. It's being Aleph, and one way to practice the Aleph, to practice that openness, is to deliberately take on that attitude of Bet, which is hospitality, which doesn't just mean hospitality to guests, although that's a wonderful way to do it, but that's like a first step. The next step, or perhaps the ongoing final step, is to again and again welcome what is in this moment. Welcome what is in this moment. Do it again and again, so that when things arise that you really can't stand, that really, really trigger you, that memory is there with you. Oh, wait a minute. What if I welcome it? Because what have I got to lose? It's already here anyway. It's not like my welcoming it is going to cause something bad to happen. Something has already happened. Something has already been triggered. Some negativity is already here present within me because of this, and so I'm going to take the attitude of welcoming. See, it says in this parsha, in the story, the Anashim of Sodom, the people of Sodom, are trying to break down the door. We can't break down the door. We can't use aggressiveness to get from an experience we don't like to an experience we do like. We just create more experience we don't like when we do that. So we can't break down the door. We are dazzled by our impulses or our reactivity, whatever you want to call it, and so we can't find the petach. So the solution is to practice again and again and again, saying, I welcome this moment as it is. I welcome this moment as it is. And remembering we are that openness. We're already the openness. We don't have to try to make ourselves into the openness. If you notice right now in this moment, everything you're experiencing, me talking, the device in front of you, the room around you, the feelings, the thoughts, everything you experience right now is all happening in the openness. Our only task is to remember the openness. Don't be dazzled and forget all about it and get caught up in the particulars of what's happening. That's what it means to be in the world but not of the world. That's the phrase I was looking for. In the world but not of the world. In fact, to be not of the world, meaning to know yourself as openness rather than as something solid, something rigid, you actually have to be fully in the world. If you're trying, because we are in the world, we already are. If we try to forget about it, if we try to go off into some fantasy inside and block the world, well, then we're already not being openness. We're already contradicting it. So the message here is to consciously reduce the thinking mind that takes us away from the moment. To bring ourselves into the moment, to notice the movement of the mind and be open to it. And by doing that, it naturally slows down. It's there when we need it to think about things that we need to think about, but it doesn't have to drag us around into its virtual reality, because all that virtual reality is nothing compared to the openness. The openness is paradoxically a fullness. It has an open quality, but it has a full quality too. I hope you enjoyed this episode on the letter Aleph and inner vastness. If you're on YouTube, be sure to like the video and subscribe. And if you're on the podcast, be sure to follow for more content like this one. If you want to go deeper, the best way to get there is to meditate regularly in community. And you can do that and integrate all the liberating qualities of all of the 32 paths with the Torah of Awakening online community. Just go to torahofAwakening.com and you can try it free. All blessings.